Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in the first of our series of 5 sessions on cultivating best human resource practices. Our session tonight covers farm financing and is a bit different from the rest of our sessions in that it's a hybrid workshop between our HR series and our newest project, Pollinating Diversity. This session is funded in part by the governments of Canada and Ontario under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, a federal, provincial, territorial initiative. Next slide, please, Brianna. So here's our plan for tonight's session. First, I'm going to share a bit of the tips and resources that the NFUO has gathered around farm financing. And then I'm going to pass it over to Brianna, who's going to introduce our speakers. And then we'll jump into the presentations from there. And around 8:15, we'll start our Q&A and discussion. And just a couple quick notes before we start. None of the advice and expertise shared tonight constitutes legal advice. And if you have any questions that pop up during the session, feel free to throw them in the chat anytime, and we'll save them for the Q&A unless they're specific clarifications during the presentations. Next slide, please, Brianna. Okay, so I'm gonna just share some general tips for applying to funding. Even if it's not your first time applying, it's nice to have a list of steps to help you go through the process. So the first step is choosing to seek funding and identifying what your farm actually needs. So you want to think about what kind of financing could support those needs. For example, do you need wage subsidies for labor needs, or loans for infrastructure and equipment, or cost sharing for environmental improvements on your farm? The next step is planning and preparing your application. This includes checking your eligibility, reviewing the funder's priorities, reading the entire application carefully, and preparing all the information and documentation that you'll need, like your FBR and CRA numbers, for example. After you've done all your research, it's time to draft your application. Treat it like you're applying for a job. So you want to show how you meet the funding criteria and the funder priorities. Use specific examples of how you align. Keep it clear and concise rather than creative unless they specifically ask for storytelling. Use the same language that the funder uses and be prepared for repetitive questions and having to rephrase your information multiple times. The next step would be to make sure that you take advantage of support from wherever you can. Sometimes you can call funder staff for support. You could contact Community Futures Ontario Development Corporation to explore what kind of free support they offer. And ask another farmer or a friend to proofread your draft application and review things like your budget for any math errors. If you're successful in getting funding, most will require you to keep really good documentation. So put key dates in your calendar, keep receipts, take photos throughout your project, and review project commitments regularly. Doing this also helps to build evidence of success for the next time that you have to apply to funding. All this being said, the first time applying will be the hardest. So hang on to your draft application and all the work that you put in to use for the next time, and just adjust the content for alignment with different funders. Next slide, please, Brianna. So the NFUO has been working on building resources to make applying for funding easier. And last year, we created a farm financing spreadsheet resource. I will put the link to that in the chat right now. So in here, we've summarized a list of grants, loans, tax incentives available to farmers. And you'll see at the bottom, we've divided the tabs by categories, including labor, non-labor, equity deserving, environmental improvements, and tax incentives. There's also a checklist section on the right side, so you can download a copy of the spreadsheet and track the resources that you're planning to apply for. This year, we've been working on turning this spreadsheet into a funding portal that will live on the NFUO website, which we're hoping will go live in February or March. And with the portal, it'll be easier to visualize which resources are open or upcoming, see a quick summary of eligibility and amount details, and see any additional resources that we've created or found relating to that funding, such as workshop recordings or checklists. So that's all I have to share. I'll pass it over to Brianna now, who's going to introduce our lovely speakers for tonight.
Thanks, Lara. Hi, everyone. So pollinating diversity, overcoming financial barriers for underrepresented farmers is the new NFUO project aimed at supporting equity-deserving farmers and underrepresented farmers to navigate applications for grants, loans, insurance programs, and public land rentals. Through this program, farmers have access to one-on-one mentoring and workshop sessions with our 3 farm finance mentors. More information about this can be found on the NFUO website under our team. And if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see the full bios for each of our farm finance mentors that are here tonight, as well as some extended information about the program and the services that are on offer. And you can reach out to each farm finance mentor individually. And you can use what you hear tonight to see if if there's anyone in particular you'd like to speak to a little bit more about your situation. And it's worth noting, I think Laura mentioned before, but this project is funded in part by the governments of Canada and Ontario under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, a federal, provincial, territorial initiative. So to introduce our 3 farm finance mentors, we'll start with Tina, who will speak first today. Tina Gokstorp. Tina is the owner and founder of Good Food Farms, a farm-to-table business focused on value-added products that meet a consumer demand for convenience and value, and also meet Tina's passion for quality and nutritionally dense foods. Tina has a background in business administration and finance and has been successful in accessing funding to implement projects and fund growth in her farm business. Specifically, Tina has a background in OSCIA funding for cover cropping, working with a local conservation authority, wetland installation, and has had successful applications for Canada Summer Jobs, Youth Employment Skills Program, Foodpreneur, Agri-Stability, Agri-Invest, Women's Enterprise, Organizations of Canada, private lenders, and more. After Tina, we will have Fianna Dirks speak. Fianna has been working as a farmer for the last 15 years, focusing on growing organically on-farm compost production, beneficial insect habitat creation, and is the co-owner of It's Giving Farm. Fianna has a background in government proposals, crafting an environmental farm plan, fundraising, utilizing different business structures, farm insurance, marketing, wholesale, and farmers markets. Specifically, they have successfully applied for opportunities like lines of credit, Canada Summer Jobs, Carrot Cash, a Fair Finance Fund loan, a Rouge National Urban Park land rental, Youth Employment Skills Program, and more. And lastly, we'll hear from Jacqueline Dwyer. Jacqueline is a farmer and community food planner with a background in equitable food access, climate solutions and environment, renewable energy, cultural food export, import, and more. Jacqueline is a co-founding member, farmer, and food advocate at Toronto Black Farmers and Growers Collective and holds a Master of Environmental Studies from York University. Jacqueline has 12 years of experience in urban commercial scale agriculture, including experience with business planning, grant applications, and navigating agricultural finance programs. She has lived experience as a Black woman farmer within the finance system and can provide practical financial advice tailored to the unique needs of underrepresented farmers. So, with all that said, we will kick it off with Tina. We're going to pass it off and we're going to put a poll in the chat for Tina's session, just so you can choose what you'd like to hear about the most so that she can kind of tailor her presentation to your specific needs tonight. So I
Great.
will pass it off to you, Tina.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, I missed some slides here. I was talking. There you go.
So I am going to take my, I'm going to have to turn my screen off when I'm talking, unfortunately, but I just want to say hello. So I am affectionately known as Farmer Tina. That's my meme. So I'm going to be talking specifically about wage subsidy programs. So the first one is the Youth Employment Skills Development Program. Well, first, let's talk a little bit about wage subsidies in general. So we're going to talk about three programs that are pretty easily accessible and applicable for if you are in the agriculture sector. So Canada Summer Jobs, Youth Employment Wage Subsidy Program, and then the Student Work Placement Program. So wage subsidies are something to consider for expanding or growing your business. And sometimes you can use a wage subsidy when you can't get subsidy for something else that you might want to do. So what it does is it allows you to have access to additional resources to free up some of your time to do something else. So for example, I tell people like the student work placement program covers 50% of wages over 4 months up to $10,000. So could you, if you spent $5,000 on somebody having them work full time for you for 4 months, could that free up time for you to do something else that would either make your business more efficient or help give you time or resources to grow your business? Can it fill a skills gap? Can it do something like that? So if you want to start marketing your business direct to consumers, and that's maybe not a skill set you have, for $5,000, could you hire someone for the summer who probably could do that relatively quickly, and then you would have time to do deliveries or sell to other customers or whatever it is you can do. So thinking about hiring or utilizing the wage subsidies, what it doesn't do is it doesn't help you to find the right people. That's still a skill set you're going to have to figure out. And I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges we have is we have to manage who is going to apply for the job, who should we hire, who should we not hire, and if we don't have enough people to fill the roles that we wanted, how are we going to address that? Because I think that's a reality. So we always have more opportunities for people to work on our farm than we necessarily have people that are interested to do that work. So we do a couple of things, like we're creative about the jobs that we offer students. So sometimes I'll have them do administration and I do the farm work. That just kind of is a way to manage the fact that you don't have access to people. So Brianne, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so that's the information I was just talking about. Is these are the wage subsidies we're going to cover. These are how they can help your business. And then we're going to talk about the wage subsidies specifically. So it does look like there's not as much interest in Canada Summer Jobs, which makes sense because the application deadline for Canada Summer Jobs has passed. If it's something you're interested in, you want to look for that in December. It does subsidize up to 8 weeks of funding. It can subsidize up to 50%. It must be a full-time position. I think it has to be 30 or 35 hours minimum. It prioritizes youth jobs that address regional priorities. So you have to look up what the regional priorities are for your business. I wouldn't say it's a super complex application. And once you've done it once, it's certainly much easier. But first time you do it, set aside some time to do that. And then they do adjust the amount of funding you get based on the number of applications they have and kind of where you fit on their grading scale. So you don't always know what you're going to get, and you don't find out that early before you hire people. Like usually you're finding out end of April, and you probably wanted to hire people before that, but that's how it works. So the Youth Employment Skills Development Program is specific to agriculture and agri-food Canada. And so it's trying to get more youth into agriculture. It does subsidize up to, I think it's $14,000 over a 1-year period. This funding sells out every year. So I think the first year or two it didn't sell out, but since then it sells out every year. If you want access to this funding, apply the first day it opens, because once the money's gone, you go on a waiting list and you may or may not get subsidy for the person that you want to hire. We're in a position where we don't hire unless we get funding. I think it's interesting how they do have some funding programs where you can retroactively you can retroactively apply for the funding. So even if you can afford to hire someone, you could still qualify for funding and get paid retroactively. So this one, you definitely want to apply early. It covers up to 50%, up to $14,000. It doesn't have to be full time. It does, you have to meet a criteria. I think it's between 18 and 30 years old. Your youth has to be. And if they are youth facing barriers, you can get up to 80% of the wages subsidized. They do also cover employer costs. So your portion of EI and CPP as part of the percentage of funding. Canada Summer Jobs and the Student Work Placement Program do not do that. You can stack this job with Canada Summer. You can stack this program with Canada Summer Jobs. So you could potentially get an employee that you get 80% of their wages covered, plus you get some funding through Canada Summer Jobs. So that's kind of a nice bonus for this program here. And then the last one I'll talk about is the Student Work Placement Program. It's very specific to college students or post-secondary students. It does cover 50% of wages up to a maximum of $5,000. So you're paying your student $10,000 for the period, and you get up to 50% of that covered. If there's someone who is a visible minority or part of an underrepresented or racialized group, you can get 70%. So that's up to $7,000 of your $10,000 in wages covered. This program works on a baseline program. So if in year one, you have to hire more students in your year one of applying for student work placement than you did last year. So if last year you had 2 students, in order to qualify for the student wage placement program, you need to hire 3 students in the first year you're applying. And I think every year after that, you have to hire an additional 1 or 2 people. So look for the criteria for this and then be really clear about how they determine what you qualify for so you can strategically apply in the right year. So the funding for this program has not opened up yet. It usually opens up in February, so kind of once the budgets are all cleared. And this program has multiple delivery agents. So there is the Canadian Agriculture and Human Resources Development. You can apply for a student through that. You can also apply through Propel, which is the tourism aspect of the program. And I think there's one other one that I think would be applicable if you're in the agriculture sector. But we usually try and apply for both because sometimes the funding will be sold out for CAHRC. So we'll apply under the Propel Tourism. And because we have a farm store, it kind of qualifies also as tourism because we have a kind of commercial kitchen or production kitchen that also qualifies under tourism. And tourism, they usually have extra funding. So you can retroactively apply for funding for the tourism program. So for example, if you wanted to hire a co-op student for this term, or if you've already hired a co-op student for this term, you could still apply for the funding for them. So the student for this program does have to qualify for the work integrated placement and that's just a letter they get from their college saying that, yes, they would qualify for this program. A work integrated learning component to their course is either beneficial or a requirement of their program. Oh, I forgot to tell you to move the slides forward, Brianne. Sorry. Can you go to Canada Summer Jobs? So this is the information on Canada Summer Jobs. 8 weeks, covers up to 50% of minimum wage, must be full-time, prioritizes youth jobs in your region, no limit on the number of positions. Although if you apply for multiple placements, your percentage of funding could be reduced. The applications are closed for this year. You can apply in December for 2027, the summer of 2027. It's a well-funded, long-established program, and it is eligible for stacking with YESP. And then the next slide. So YESP, specific to agriculture. You may want to just double check the eligibility requirements. So I think it's 18 to 30. It's project-based, so you have to justify that it fits with their criteria. It's a one-year funding program up to $14,000. You can get either 50 or 80% covered, plus your employer costs. There's no hours restriction, so it could be someone part-time. It's very competitive, so apply early. And you can stack this program with Canada Summer Jobs. And then the last one, Brianna, is student work placement. So that is specific to post-secondary. It's a work integrated learning program, covers either 50 or 70% up to $5,000 or $7,000 maximum per semester, per term. There are 3 terms for the year: winter, summer, and fall. This program works based on a sliding scale. So make sure you understand how they determine who you're eligible for, and they'll tell you. So once you put your information in, it'll tell you how many you qualify for. It generally launches in February, so be ready to apply. There are multiple streams. You can apply through Canada Agriculture Human Resources Canada, Propel, or I've put in a link if you want to look at all the delivery agents for that program. And then they sometimes change the requirements, so it's not 100% clear what that's going to be this year, but I think it's been a successful program. And then consider applying to programs like environmental science, animal studies, landscape design, etc., to find students for your business. So unless there's any specific questions, if you want to move on to the next speaker, and then I can always answer questions at the end.
That sounds good. We can move on to Fianna next.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Fianna, one half of It's Giving Farm, and I will be talking about the less sexy financing, which is money you have to pay back. Um, but also very important for farm growth. I'm going to talk particularly about our experience with Fair Finance Fund. So, been farming most of my life, but for running my own business, this is going to be, I guess, year 3. So we've been kind of deep in the financing startup and like continuing infrastructure costs and wage subsidy costs. So Fair Finance has been a really important tool that we used to get us to where we are. And yeah, so I can go to the next slide, Brianna. I think I guess these are going to be, particularly with loans and any farm finance, your specific business and your specific needs are going to be your most determining factor. And I think a lot of what I'm going to share is like, suggestions and as a part of the program we're all into, like there's lots of opportunities to work with any of us one-on-one to kind of learn more about our different experiences or to ask questions that might be more related to your business. So I'm going to share kind of some general things, and there's obviously ways to be way more specific. I think one of the strongest things if you're determining if a loan is the correct next step for your business is you want to make sure that you have a strong business plan. And I can't emphasize that enough. I think that has been one of our strongest guiding forces as we're starting this business. It's a document that you can always look back to give you direction. It also is going to be, it's kind of like what shows off your business to possible investors. The EFAO has had a business planning course available that I really recommend. Also something I can help folks with if they're looking to update or create one. That has been really helpful for us in getting any of the loans, lines of credits, and other forms of financing that we've used. And also you're going to want to have a really good understanding of your cash flow. You're going to need to know exactly how much is coming out every month for your subsidy or for wages. What are your beginning of the season expenses versus, the money that's coming in later. I think continuing to update that and having a really accurate cash flow is also going to determine whether a loan's right or not for you. I think another important thing too is when you're to the point of getting a loan, you want to make sure that it's it's that you know the type of purchases and infrastructure that are going to help your business. I think it can, some things, for example, is if you buy infrastructure with a loan that you're going to size out to within that loan period, you're kind of burning money at that stage. So kind of feeling like you're at a place with your own business to know which purchases are going to be allow you that long-term growth is so essential, because if you, let's say, are buying a bunch of infrastructure costs, get a loan for a fridge, but you outgrow that fridge within 4 years, and you're still paying that off while your business, needs larger, more infrastructure, it can be really difficult. So something to consider. And another thing, I think loans are, they're going to be strongest when you're also buying kind of, a larger van, upgrading a wash and pack station, maybe a new transplanting tool for the field, things that are going to decrease labor and help increase your sales. If you're using a loan to try to just cover operating costs, that most likely means that there's other kind of like business cash flow issues that are happening. And once you start using loans to cover, basic operating costs, it can get into a bit of a hole. So um, just something to consider, like some big questions to ask before you kind of dive into this process. We use the Fair Finance loan because there are very little loan processes in Ontario to access. And I'll show a couple other examples on the next slide, but there's not many. And Fair Finance started in 2019, I believe, so it's even quite new in this process. They have intake periods. I believe that they're still in an intake period right now. The initial process is you fill out an application form that can be found on the website. It's going to kind of just ask you some basic overview questions about if you connect with their type of loan program. So essentially, they're looking for Ontario, food businesses and farm businesses that have a social and economic impact, and any kind of farm or food process that's outside of the like mainstream, maybe large cash crop or you know Heinz Incorporated, you're gonna have some sort of social and economic impact. So it's pretty easy to fit into that. And they're open to ask a lot of questions in the initial process. Once you do the initial process, and if you're granted to the next step, that is when you have to submit all the paperwork to go forward. So that's going to be a strong business plan. That's going to be, particularly, they're going to look for what's the funding for, and then you're going to need to provide examples of how much those things are going to cost with kind of a cost analysis. They're also going to look toward your business's like previous returns and bookkeeping, along with also like risks and assets and different ways you're going to grow forward. They offer loans from 20,000 to 200,000. I think there's been a change recently. Like when we applied, anything under, I believe it was 75,000, you didn't need collateral. But now, if you're getting a loan that's over $50,000, there is the possibility that collateral is needed. So that would be some sort of asset that is available in case the loan doesn't get paid back. But anything under 50K, goes to you don't necessarily need that. I think another really interesting thing about this loan is that they also do like character-based eligibility. So, if you go to the bank or something, you're never going to be like, oh, here's like some local folks and some of my customers and what people say about me. They're never going to like read those essentially character reports to see like if they want to give you money or not. But Fair Finance, that is something that they take in, and like your experience within farming or other aspects of your life. So that's kind of unique forward like that. And this process it's just a lot of paperwork. You're gonna need bank statements. You're gonna need cash flow projections up, and you're gonna need to be able to prove show the money and increase, and particularly show that you can pay back the loan over the 5-year period. So that some helpful tips for that are, the loan's going to help your business grow. So just make sure that in your 5-year projections that you're showing that growth, and that should have no problem paying back these loans. They're at 7.5%, which is going to be a lot lower than a line of credit, substantially lower than a credit card. It's a little bit more than a mortgage, but it's a pretty fair loan amount. I hopefully maybe with some um, rates dropping that also gets a bit lower. So fingers crossed if for future applicants that number can drop a little bit. Another unique thing about the program is you get mentorship also comes with it, and they have a group of folks with many different experiences from value added to bookkeeping to kind of large ag projects. So you get one-on-one mentorship for a certain amount of time, which is great. And for us, the loan really helped us grow and scale very quickly. Have had a lot of farming experience, so we kind of knew the things we needed, knew the scale we needed to be at. Um, but some of the hardest things are spending that money early in the season when you need enough money to pay for seeds, and you need enough money to pay staff wages through April and May when cash is really low. It's hard to make the big investments in a new van or in large equipment when you're holding back money because the spring is a tough time. So it really just gives you that opportunity to get the equipment to help grow the business, and it was really, yeah, successful for us. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. Um, I guess another other couple options just to share are, I think, so Fair Finance is, yeah, going to be paying back at 7.2%. They're kind of a community. They're out there. It's a great program, and honestly, for Ontario growers, it's one of the only kind of loan programs I think that is accessible right now to ecological farmers. But another option that uh, we've dabbled in a bit, and I know there's a few farmers around here that have done actually a really good job with, is like community lending. So if your business has been running for a little while, sometimes your biggest advocates or your biggest like character references are your customers at farmers markets or your CSA members. And I know folks have been like, we really need this new tractor. It's going to help us with this or that. Or we're planning on building some greenhouses to offer a winter CSA. And they've just kind of reached out to community members being like, hey, this is our funding proposal. If anyone's interested, it's $5,000 and we'll pay you back over the next 3 years at a 3% interest rate. And they've been able to fund kind of large infrastructure projects on their farm just through utilizing that network of folks that appreciate the work they do. Obviously, it might not be there might only be 3 or 4 people who have the money or capacity or comfortable to do that, but that could be enough to remove yourself from having to pay many thousands of dollars back in interest to a lender. Another thing that there's a microloan is, I thought there was a spelling error, but our farm's in the NFU Local 345, and some of the board members came up with a microloan project that they launched last year. And I think it was something that helped us. It allowed us to get these like collapsible totes that in different colors that we use between different markets and wholesale. It really helped organize our refrigeration unit and getting orders in and out this season. And what it is essentially is our local, with all of the fees that they're collecting, with that money they have, what they're doing is they're offering these microloans that are then paid back by members of that local. So at the local AGM, members come with a proposal. I'm looking to get a wrap on our vans so we have better advertising. I'm looking to buy containers to expand the organization of our business and the way we're shipping. Folks come up with the proposals, and then the members of that local get to vote on it. And this is going to be year 2, and I think it's not much money. It's $2,000, but that can go kind of a long way. When you're able to stack that with a wage subsidy or a small grant or other things. So something that I hope other locals can model after, and hopefully, yeah, it can grow and spread through Ontario. I think it's a really great project. It also brings up a lot more local support with which I think is really helpful in the NFU. It gets members more involved in their local, which is great. And then for folks in Ontario, kind of the only other, there are going to be, I think an important thing to also remember anytime you're doing farm financing is that you're also a small business, and there are a lot of small business, um, different types of things for, whether you're, different experiences or different types of businesses, but not always getting caught up in looking only for agriculture-based funding. There's a lot of small business funding that, might have loans and grants that's available. So somewhere you should also always look. But for farmers, kind of the only other things to really access for loans are the Canadian Agricultural Loans Act, which has been around since 2009. Essentially, it is the government is able to like be a backer for these loans so that banks will offer them to farmers more easily. Um, you know, it's supposed to essentially allow farmers to go to their credit union or their large bank and access agricultural loans easier. And it is something to look into. They will a lot like fair finance, isn't going to cover the cost of a house or cover the cost of the land, but CALA will to some degree. So something to look into. And they also have, if you're a young farmer or a woman farmer or someone facing barriers, they'll cover up to 90% of financing. So you only have to pay 10% down on the loan. And Farm Credit Canada also, these are larger organizations, but they really are worth looking into. Like Farm Credit Canada has a really great line of credit option that can allow your business to have like a line of credit where you're only making interest-based, or you're only making interest-based payments and not principal-based payments, because principal-based payments can be a lot, especially if they're over a short span, which is something to also consider in your cash flow. So those are some options. I know that on Wednesday, so this Wednesday, Sustain Ontario is hosting a little bit different, but also a farm kind of finance, a small workshop. And someone from Fair Finance is going to be talking there just for a few minutes. So if you want to get a chance to talk to someone from the organization who's not a farmer, I would recommend attending that. I think Lara will throw that in the chat. And then there's also going to be the First Nations Ontario, like ag funding is going to have a representative there. So there'll be some information around funding for First Nation farmers. And and a few other folks. So that's Sustain Ontario, and that's going to be this Wednesday. So so thanks everyone. And that's our experience getting loans.
Great. Thank you, Fianna. We'll pass it over to Jacqueline now.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Jacqueline, and one of the co-founders of the work of the Toronto Black Farmers and Food Growers Collective. And so listening to the other two presenters, our experience up until today was never like that. So this year, this 2026 season will be 13 years since we decided to take back the right to good food in the community we grow, and in also our community. We have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and we have come into this arena very innocently. We both come from farms where our birth country is Jamaica. So we live in a tropical paradise. And so we took for granted what was always around us to be something that we'd always have anywhere else we went. And so when we decided to trek into the scene of digging into the food system here, we innocently came in because we wanted to learn, because we know that this is a seasonal environment. And our foods that we eat, most of it can't be grown here. But what we eat here, we wanted to make sure that it was clean, it was grown in an equitable way, and actually we can afford it. And so a number of years ago, we decided that this was getting too sexy and too expensive. And so when I said that, I meant that the quote unquote outlets that carry good food, clean food, it became, a miniature mortgage when you went to the grocery store, when you went to those stores. And so we decided that, you know what, we took what our parents and grandparents and great grandparents was doing, as something that, we'd always have. Now we're in a different place. We need to learn the commercial scale of it in growing in a seasonal environment. And so we started out. And then we decided that, before we started jumping into a business, let's see how we can learn to feed ourselves first. So 13 years later, in between all those hills and valleys, we were in a number of spaces. And we also learned, being in those spaces, that we were typically the only melanated, dark-skinned people up in there. And when they talk about farms, they don't talk about farms as being a means that everybody has the right to eat well. They talk about farm in a broad term, and it was more corporate. They were more corporate structure. They were more family health structures that eventually sometimes went on for a couple more generations, or the generations there with their parents, when they got older and went off to school and come back, they decided that they wanted to venture into different careers. So their parents or grandparents would hold the land as long as they could, and then they sell it. And that money would go towards their taking care of them, because land here has become a very costly and vital commodity. So we farm on public land. We are in Downsview Park, and we've been in there since 2013. And so even with the landlord that we have to deal with, it's problematic. And a lot of people don't like when we speak, because we speak and we pinpoint the truth about who gets to eat well and who is just barely able to go to the grocery store and buy foods that are not so great for their health. So the food we grow on our site, we focus on cultural relevance. We also focus on a lot of the seasonal crops that we think are great in its season. And we look for different ways to make the food that we grow as a nonprofit. So we are a nonprofit, and our work is more towards, our work is social justice. Access to good food is a right of all living things on the planet, whether you're people, animal, insects, whatever you are. It's a right to everybody to have access to good, healthy food. And so on our site, we do the cultural crops that can be grown in the short Canadian growing season, and we also do the seasonal crops. Because the land is not ours, we thought about doing, planting out a good portion of it in perennial foods, which is also very beautiful in this environment, but it's not our land. And, they might decide that, they want the lease to be shortened, and then we'll have to dig up all of that stuff, find space to put it and all of that. So we said, we'll just stick to the crops that we can do short term in the season. At the the back of our site, we started doing about maybe 4 years ago. We planted out a native perennial canopy. So again, it allows for more, beneficial insects during the flowering of these plants to come. Additionally, with what's already wild around us, to give us more of a mixture of eaters and beneficial helpers that helps us to produce as much as we can. Now, we are also one of the co-founder of the Afro-Caribbean Farmers Market, and we are in Little Jamaica. We also do a community food space, which we call a farm shop. You can come on site on a Sunday. We might change it this year because the market is back up this new year in Little Jamaica. So we'll have two spaces where we really sell our foods. And people come from all over to come and get what we have to offer. So that's been a real bonus in the addition of making the wares that we offer accessible to the people who really need to eat them the most. So good food is a right. As I said, it's a human right. It's an animal right. It's an insect right. And ecological production is something that should be like the foundation of what this work is, but it's not. Only some people can get to do it because, again, it takes money, it takes time, it takes equipment, and it also takes knowledge. So if you don't have any of those, you are literally trying to figure out, when certain things start happening to your farm, how to dig your way out of that. Now, when it comes to funding and money, we don't traditionally try to go to look for funding. And I know that the presenter before me talks about the Fair Finance Fund. And so the irony of the Fair Finance Fund, I sat on their board for about 2 years. And our work was never a work that they would fund. And it's so interesting. I got some information about a week ago from NFU, and I started digging in it because I had some time. And I started digging in it, and I noticed that, all the stuff that they had to offer, like Fair Finance, they're now talking about, non-traditional farmers, farmers who look like me and other racialized or native group of people. They are providing now some resource for them to be able to be in the game. So for me, listening to the two presenter before me is what the traditional system looks like. I'm not a part of that traditional system because when I started this work, I started the work because in the communities or neighborhoods that we live in the urban space, we don't get access to the same quality food that most other communities that are more affluent, and they could be in the urban space too. It costs us way more. We get less quality. And so we decided to change that for ourselves. Now, people who would fund us or groups that would fund us, sometimes we have private people come to our farm. We don't know who they are, but we're always very welcoming and nice to folks who want to come, take their time and come and see what we're doing. So we get private donations. Even though we're a nonprofit, people like to donate to what we're doing in an urban space on public land. They love that idea. We also are connected to institutions like York University and groups like UFA on campus. They fund us too. That it's not a large amount of money, but they give us funding when they have it. We are also funded by Lush, the body cosmetic company. They have a charity pot. So these are sources additional to the traditional means of grants and or funding and or loans that are out there. And if you feel that those are going to be strangling you at some point and you have to balance out to, pay loan, pay yourself, do all of that stuff, then this is another route you can take. And so you have some small foundations that are, also, have the ability to give, to fund you to do food security work, to build, sustainable food production sites wherever you are. There is another social justice organization called Groundswell. They fund as well. They always fund us. Um, we got funding from the Red Cross one year, and this was in the the energy of the pandemic, and so they fund us for 100K. And in the light of starting to spend the funding for the project that we initially wrote to them to do in our community with a naturopath that lives in the community, we did about one or two workshops online because it was the pandemic. Everybody was afraid to be around each other. So we did it online. And then after the second workshop, we were told by the then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that everything is shut down, the virus is spreading, and just it's mayhem. So we had this money, and after they shut down the not just Canada but the world for 2 years, folks in the community came to us and say, "Hey, Black farmers, you're always giving and sharing with the community. Everybody is gone. None of the organizations are around, and we are hungry." And so we had this funding, and we said, "Okay." We got together with our board. We spoke to them, said, "You have our blessings. We'll make sure that we collect all the receipts. We'll make sure that we show where this funding went." And so we have strategic partners. One of them, Country Heritage Park in Milton, on the north side of Milton, off Tremaine Road, was one of our strategic partner. And they helped us. They connected us to sources that we didn't have connections to, and we end up we're able to go to the Ontario Food Terminal and buy local food from local farmers on the terminal present, and in the outside section of the terminal where it's covered, that's all local growers that is supposed to be there. And so we were able to do that. We got donation of eggs and chickens from our partner Country Heritage, and we were able to create really viable food hampers and donated those to the community. So after that funding was over, we got into some hot water with Canada, with Red Cross Canada, because they said we didn't ask for permission after after the government had shut down everybody. Nobody was talking to everybody, and everybody ran out of the city and left all the urbanites in the city to figure it out for themselves. So we did. Anyways, it worked out. And over time, we learned of other foundations that give, like the Peter Gilligan Foundation. We're also funded by the Greenbelt Foundation and so on and so forth. But we learned that through these processes, folks, I know farming is not child's play. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work when you have to do it by yourself, and you have so many different things to do day to day on site on your farm. But always make space. If you want people to donate to your work, if you want foundations to find you, and institutions to hear about you, you have to create an attraction on your site. create something that will invite others to come and see what you're doing, if it's even once a year. And also, make time to sometimes just go and listen to institutions about, the kind of work they're doing in maybe the community you are around, environment, food, people, community development, because they also have a responsibility in helping and supporting these great initiatives, particularly for food in communities. And I know it might be different in the rural because everybody's so spread out, but always make it to the point of your duty to connect, get your names on information lists, talk to people, let people know what you're doing and why your farm is different, because it might sound monocropping, but all farms are not the same. And we are not farming for the same idea. Some of us are, but not all of us. So if you want people to know what you're doing, and sometimes we too are also sometimes guilty of that, because during the season when you're busy, you don't have time to really bond or build relationship. But one of the things we found out during our season when we plant some of our cultural crops and we do a reel on TikTok or whatever, and people start sharing that, and they start coming from east, west, north, and south all over, and they start bringing folks with them. And the folks that they're bringing a lot of times are people that we don't know, even though they're from our community, but they belong to institutions and they belong to organizations and they're connected to donors who, when they come and they see the quality of the food we grow and what we're growing, they get excited and they donate and they want to do things with us. So it's a great way for us to be able to share a lot of the great possibilities that we are doing on our farms. And it doesn't matter how small it is or how large you are, always make space for selling is great. I'm not downing selling, but always make space to really be able to connect with people who who comes and can like literally say, I know Black farmers, I've been to their farm, they do this, they do these kinds of events and activities and initiatives that actually engages the community. Just make time for that, because fundraising is key. And if you just grow to sell, then look for the markets or the platforms that are going to give you what your food is truly valued at. Because what we find in the sector is that farmers do all the hard work and they make the least of what their food goes out there in the marketplace, and it's been marked up to sell it at so much higher prices. So that's my little story in sharing with you what you can do, how you can do it. And if you feel that, you want to ask me any question or you want to come and visit our site, you're quite welcome. We're on the north side of Downsview Park. So we're right at Keel and Shepherd. And I wish you all a fantastic season. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline.